moment. To this, we'd have to add sort of wood and animal waste in the developed world, but this is energy that's actually sold. As you can see, not far short of half of the energy used in the world today is from crude oil. Roughly speaking, a quarter each from gas and from coal. So 9/10 come from what we call the fossil fuels, the carbon-based fuels, and at the moment in the world, the other 1/10 comes from about 3/4 nuclear and 1/4 hydro. But the important thing there is the enormous dominance at the moment of these fuels, which inevitably produce carbon dioxide and are inevitably limited.
Right. Well, we'll pause there for a moment. We'll come back to this chat shortly, because we thought it would be interesting to find out whether people would support alternative energy sources, even if they cost more, or whether money rules with these sorts of issues. So we went to the streets and asked people which power source they'd prefer to use and what affects their decision. Here are just a few answers which are indicative of what we heard all day.
Can I ask you, what form of energy source would you prefer to supply your domestic household needs?
Probably natural gas. Only because, from what I understand, it's the most efficient, but I don't really know much more than that.
Depends on availability and cost, like everything else.
At the end of the day, whatever we are saying, whatever the media is saying, whatever the politicians are saying, it is down to money and cost.
All things being equal, ideally the sun, obviously.
So why don't you use the kind of solar power at the minute? I assume you don't use that.
No, I haven't got any solar power. I couldn't afford it.
So people use the energy sources that they have because they're there.
You know, so many power sources look good on paper, but then when you look into them, it seems like so many have one flaw or another, so it's very difficult.
Yeah. It seems, though, Alison, that people are quite open to alternative energy sources, but of course the big thing is cost. That, you know, I can't afford it. What would be your reply to that?
Costs are coming down for green fuels. Some are inevitably more expensive than others, just because the technology, as you say, isn't quite there yet. Doesn't mean to say the technology won't be there in the future. And at the moment there are alternatives which are green and which are cheap as some of the conventionals.
Right. Now, see, this is something we're not really aware of. I've always thought that they're very expensive. But Malcolm, I suppose the other issue is climate change. We're seeing it is happening due to fossil fuels. Surely this is the way we should be going.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways you could improve the economics of renewable source of energy would be to charge the fossil fuels for the environmental damage that we suspect is going to be caused by carbon dioxide. We should bear in mind that with some of the renewables, particularly with wind and solar and tidal, which are three of the most promising, they're not necessarily producing the energy when we want it. And the two difficulties with renewables are, firstly, they're fairly dilute as energy sources, so you need a lot of machinery. And secondly, if you move up to beyond about 20% of wind, now we're a long, long way short of that, but if you went a bit further than that, as it looks at the moment, you'd have to build backup power stations to produce the energy when the wind wasn't blowing. Now, in that case, that begins to skew the economics again, because you have to count in not just the cost of your wind machine, but also the cost of keeping this other power capacity going.
Right.
But I do stress we're a long way from that. We can build an awful lot of wind farms before we start seeing that sort of problem.
OK, I'd like to we'll actually talk about wind in part two. Wave power, though, is extremely predictable. You know, as long as the moon is doing the tidal thing, we're always going to have waves to...
Yeah, I mean, there have been questions with some of the practical devices as to how robust they are against severe storms, because, of course, waves do change. They're not as intermittent as some of the other sources, but there are severe storms. You need to build machinery that can be robust enough against that, and the number of wave generators we have seen have been really quite severely damaged quite early in their lives. So it's not without problems, but if we turned our back on every source of energy because there were difficulties, we wouldn't get very far. As you were hinting, there's no nice way of making energy. They've all got drawbacks.
Yeah.
Alison, let me bring you into this as the environmentalist. Obviously, we're not getting rid of fossil fuels anytime soon. If you'd like to see them start steering it, are there certain fuels, or is gas more efficient than, say, coal or oil? I mean, if they wanted to start weaning ourselves off of one of them, who's the real damage coming from?
It has to be burning of fossils. You find now that new power stations being built, or indeed old existing power stations, are being cleaned up. You can make their emissions a lot less than they were, and we are seeing that. A lot happened in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
but a lot more needs to be done.
Indeed.
Yeah, and certainly I think alternatives are the way we'll be looking,
Yep.
and certainly we're going to be looking at wind in the second half of the program.
Thanks for now.
Now we're going to go to a break right now, but don't go away, because in the next half we talk wind power.
Indeed, we've touched on a little bit in part 1, but more to come in part 2. Greenpeace has a vision. It wants to see an extensive collection of wind farms built, but not on valuable land, rather out at sea, where the winds are high and predictable. They've compiled a stunning film to help people understand their vision. You'll see it straight after the break. Join you then.